In the dawning years of the 18th century, tensions were steadily simmering between American pioneers and British colonial authorities. Settlers lived under exploitative trade constraints, burdensome levies, and escalating tax loads imposed by Parliament and King George III. Each fresh imposition stoked the flames of colonial resentment against the British authorities. But then the fury reached a boiling point after the ghastly Boston Massacre in 1770. When a mob of riled-up citizens scuffled with redcoat soldiers, the nervous troops fired point-blank into the unruly crowd without restraint. Their barrage of gunshots cut down Crispus Attucks and 4 other colonists in a horrific spectacle. Word of the massacre raced along the 13 colonies, igniting anti-British fervour. Settlers from New Hampshire to Georgia seethed at the slaughter of innocents. They burned effigies of British officials as cries for retribution mounted. This wanton brutality underscored the urgent need for self-rule, without callous overlords encroaching on fundamental liberties. In the coming years, further British impositions fueled the fires of rebellion. The Tea Act enraged colonists by granting a trade monopoly to the mighty East India Company. Protesters stormed ships in the Boston Tea Party revolt, hurling chests of tea into the harbour. These escalating acts of defiance signalled colonial willingness to rebel against unjust edicts. As colonial exasperation peaked, the Continental Congress took the momentous step of constituting the Continental Army in 1775. They appointed Virginian George Washington as Commander-in-Chief, charging him with confronting the disciplined British forces. Washington's charisma and grit compelled the ragged troops onward through the war's bleakest days. His daring Christmas night crossing of the ice-clogged Delaware River culminated in a pivotal triumph against Hessian mercenaries at the Battle of Trenton. This bold feat revived sagging morale and faith in the struggle. In the harsh winter months at Valley Forge, Washington kept his demoralized forces intact despite supply scarcities and bitter cold. His iron resolve thwarted wholesale desertions. This fortitude laid the foundations for later victories. Combined colonial and French squadrons eventually surrounded and forced the surrender of Lord Cornwallis at Yorktown in 1781. This decisive defeat punctured British fighting spirit, cementing American autonomy. Earlier, novice colonial units had endured crushing setbacks against elite British regulars on numerous occasions. They were expelled from Manhattan after the Battle of Long Island and compelled to retreat from New York. British brigades hounded Washington's army across New Jersey in the summer and autumn of 1776, nearly seizing them multiple times. However, the colonists learned from their miscalculations and regrouped. They adopted guerrilla tactics better matched to their capabilities, dealing stinging blows to British supply lines. At Saratoga, in 1777, an entire British regiment surrendered in a stunning reversal, underscoring the Continental's tenacity. Along with support from France, these victories ultimately sealed Britain's defeat. Against formidable odds, General Washington had spearheaded the underdog colonists to a resounding victory for independence reverberating globally. The Declaration of Independence represented a groundbreaking philosophical and political treatise. Drafted primarily by Thomas Jefferson, the document interwove Enlightenment reasoning with indictments against King George III. Jefferson eloquently argued the colonists' entitlement to dissolve the political bands linking them to despotic Britain. He championed the radical idea that all men inherently possess inalienable rights to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. This proclamation that individuals inherently hold rights rattled monarchical assumptions across the globe. The declaration opened by avowing that all men are created equal. Though blatantly contradicted by the entrenchment of slavery, this pronouncement reverberated as a bold challenge to hereditary rule. It implied prospective movements toward equal representation irrespective of ancestry. Jefferson arraigned King George III for inflicting a long train of abuses on the colonies, from improper taxation to suppressing local assemblies. The Declaration contended that governing authority derives from the people's consensus, not divine right. It cemented a definitive break from antiquated notions of subjects bowing before absolute monarchs. Word of America's astounding triumph over the British Crown electrified burgeoning reform movements across Europe. The Declaration's vision of fundamental human dignity and rights inspired French intellectuals like Lafayette. Within a decade, French reformers overtly invoked America's experiment in wresting freedom from a despotic ruler. The Declaration's tenets fueled further anti-monarchist rumblings in nations from Ireland to Spain to the French Caribbean. By championing universal human rights, the American Revolution's rhetoric left European empires vulnerable to intensifying dissent. The blossoming United States Constitution created an innovative system balancing authority across executive, legislative, and judicial realms. This pioneering diffusion of power diverged sharply from the dominance of hereditary rulers in Europe. Term constraints established peaceful transitions of authority, contrasting with violent dynastic clashes. George Washington voluntarily resigned his military commission following independence, spurning enticements to seize control as dictator. He later declined a third presidential term, transferring power to elected successors. This principled restraint nurtured the republican system and acclimated its citizens to orderly, consensual governance. The American model signified a seismic shift from despotisms relying on standing armies and secret constabularies. Its stress on representation and popular agreement seeded global campaigns against tyranny. The concept of innate human dignity and fundamental rights resonated widely, galvanizing oppressed groups to invoke America's founding values in their quests for emancipation. Independence ignited imaginations globally, accelerating challenges to European imperialism. Slaves in French Haiti invoked the Declaration when overthrowing French estate owners. Simón Bolívar and José de San Martin spearheaded Latin Americans in casting off Spanish rule. Democratic yearnings swelled in Poland, Greece, and beyond. America stood as a beacon of liberation from dynastic subjugation. Despite its imperfections, the American Revolution dealt a resounding ideological blow to autocracy's supposed inevitability, kindling movements which still blaze vibrantly worldwide. The American Revolution demarcated a tectonic global shift toward popular sovereignty. For eons, the assumed natural order was for monarchs to wield absolute dominion over subjects. But America's founders categorically rejected this, championing instead that legitimate authority originates from the people's consensus. This conviction impelled rural colonists into audacious rebellion against the British Crown, then the world's preeminent military juggernaut. Against tremendous odds, their quest for autonomy birthed a nation founded on tenets of inborn human rights. Notwithstanding conspicuous failings sullying their own conduct, the founders' vision resonated as a clarion call against oppression. The revolution spawned documents like the Declaration of Independence, which still reverberate powerfully worldwide. Jefferson's immortal words proclaiming equality and inalienable rights inspired democracy activists globally. America's victory energized multitudes to rise up against despotic regimes everywhere. The new United States archetype of checks on authority and civic participation fueled campaigns against absolute monarchy. Washington's example of relinquishing command of the army and self-restraint in presidential terms reinforced Republican ideals. The revolution's rhetoric left dynastic bastions vulnerable to intensifying dissent. While tragic failings like slavery endured, the core vision shattered the supposed divine right of rulers to dominate their populaces. The American experiment demonstrated that a government of the people, by the people, and for the people could thrive without obedient subjects governed from afar.
Oh, hello there, dear viewer. Still here, are we? Well, thank you for watching, and I hope you enjoyed this journey through the absurdities of history. If you're looking for more content like this, here's what the YouTube gods think you will want next. If you wish to support the channel further, feel free to check the description below for some useful links, and bye for now.